Hello, everyone. I'm David Younger,
Hi, I'm Elvin Aydin Keles.
and we created Chronic Illness Therapy to provide support and resources for people living with chronic health conditions. Today, we're going to talk about loss. I just came back from New York, and I was there for a work meeting, a group that I've been in for 10 years that I'm leaving because it meets twice a year. And it's just gotten too hard to travel twice a year to this group, and so I'm giving it up, um, not because I really want to, but because I feel like it's what I need to do. And that's combined with the fact that I'm dealing with the loss of my mother, and I was with I spent time with my father over the weekend, and just inevitably we're dealing with different relationships, and our losses are different.
So I want to also mention what we just talked about ambivalence and what kind of what happens after we lose a loved one,
mm,
especially after a long illness, and things might change. Like it happened with my dad, and you're saying it's happening with your dad. When they start to move on,
mm.
it's it's impossible not to feel ambivalent, even though we understand, right? And
Yeah, and I mean, for me, there's no replacing my mother, um, but obviously for him, it's not that he's replacing her, but you know, he can find a companion.
yes, and I can certainly understand his motivations because he's getting older and life is not getting longer, and he wants to live what he has left of it. And
Right.
when you don't have a companion, it's kind of not that cool, and you want to enjoy your life. So we all enjoy it better with someone, at least I do. So let's talk about that today, in terms of um, loss and what happens to us when we lose a loved one, especially after a long or chronic illness. And the survivor's guilt is there. There's certainly there's some relief from not having to take care of someone, and then there is some ambivalence about wanting to do different things and then yet feeling like you're betraying someone's memories and love. And I'm sure it's very, very ambivalent. And also for us, the rest of the family is also it's a very dark place to go to. I think it's important to mention those things.
Yeah, it is important to talk about them. And obviously, yeah, my mother had muscular dystrophy, and the past 5 years of her life were really difficult, and she just
Mm.
became weaker and weaker, and had a few times where she had to be hospitalized for um, not not things directly related to the muscular dystrophy, but things that almost killed her. Um, and so my father was living with her and witnessing all of this and seeing how much more limited she became. And um, so that's where he's coming from, and where I'm coming from is that I wasn't living with her, and I wasn't having to take care of her on a daily basis, and
Mhm.
I wasn't ready for her to die. um,
Mhm. Of course not. Yeah.
so our experiences, and I can totally understand why he would be, amongst other things, experiencing relief,
Yeah.
that she's not suffering anymore. And they had caretakers for the past few years, and um, so our experiences are very different.
And I have to mention, I guess, I'm sorry, I turned off all the whistles and bells and whistles, but it's still doing it.
Yeah.
So I have to mention the elephant in the room as well. I'm wondering, as someone living with muscular dystrophy
Mhm.
and witnessing this, and being happily married, how does that affect you? How does that make you feel like? And as the son, I mean, there's so many angles here that you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's huge, because number one, there's this loss of this other my mom who had the same type of muscular dystrophy, and I feel there's almost like this abandonment. Like I feel alone with it in a way. Um, there's the fact that um, I mean, I'm very hopeful on the one hand that there's going to be a treatment or a cure, but on the other hand, my mother died. I'm 40, almost 43. My mother had just turned 69. She was young, and I can't imagine or think that the same thing is going to happen to me. And I know, you know, our we're different people, and our progressions have been different, but still
Mm.
there's so much that's almost undigestible. Like it's just so big that I don't allow myself to sort of project and think about what things are going to be like. And that to me is also where the mindfulness practice is a lifesaver.
Mm-hmm.
Is I just, in order to sort of maintain my sanity and my well-being, I just have to stay present and do whatever I can now to because if I create all these possible narratives, and it's just a recipe for
Yeah.
total
Depression.
darkness and depression.
Yeah, I can totally hear that. And it's, as I was saying before, my in-laws are in town and they're also aging and ailing with various conditions. And it's very scary to witness this. Even, you know, I don't know if one of us will develop the same diseases, and where is that going to go? And already feeling stuck with two young kids and constantly having to worry about who's going to take care of them. Also living here with no extended families, both of us. It's very scary not to have a fallback plan. And I often, envy people with larger families who are close by and are willing to help and are providing support. And I think there is a lot to be said about being a nuclear family and what kind of psychological um, time bombs are ticking there as well.
Yeah, and we've had a similar experience in terms of not having an extended family that we can rely on to help with childcare, and obviously having a mother with a chronic illness. I
Of
mean,
course.
they had to deal with their own care.
Yeah.
um, and I always imagined that, in fact, we've been looking for the past year to move to a bigger home.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we were taking into consideration was a place that would be completely ADA accessible for my mom.
Mhm.
Not just for me because of the things that I need, but also a space that, so that we're fully factoring. I'm an only child. So
Yeah.
um, now that's gone. And, um, you know, that's a relief in a way. But I would, I would pay that price in a second to have her back. And, um,
Of course.
you know, I told her when I saw her the last time I saw her, she was in the hospital for 10 days. And um, I told her when she pulled through, actually, I said, I'm not ready for you to die. Um, and I have to think that if she was 85, for example, 90,
Mhm.
that wouldn't be the case. That she was still a young woman
Mhm. Mhm.
but in a body that was just broken down.
Yeah. And that is the most heart wrenching part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe her soul wasn't ready to go either, but
Yeah.
her body was failing her. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting you asked about the elephant in the room, and this group that I was in for 10
Mm.
years, when I was saying goodbye to them this past weekend, one of the group members asked me how I deal with the thinking
Mm.
about the future and um the possibilities and the possibilities if there is no treatment or cure,
Yeah.
because a lot has to, even though they're so much further along than they ever have been, a lot has to happen, to get to keep the pharmaceutical companies interested, going through the whole process with the FDA. um, I mean, who knows? And I am hopeful, but what if, there is that what if there isn't, and what if things progress the same way they've progressed in this past decade, and they continue to progress. um, you know and I don't know, like, the only thing I can do is take it a day at a time and
Exactly.
live right now, and that's not a platitude for me. Like, I have learned the fact that I haven't been depressed for 6 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
I have learned through this, like, a lot of therapy, a lot of self-care, and the mindfulness and meditation, to stay present and just not allow myself to go there.
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's a that's kind of what saves me.
No, I hear you, and I think it was important to mention that, and relating to our previous conversation where we said we need to be able to talk about death
Mm,
and how we um, think about it, or how we're afraid of it, or how we dread it. I mean, these are all healthy, I think, conversations to have. So I wanted to honor that and
yes.
mention that there's always that possibility. I'm feeling the same way about my grandmother and my mother. Both died of the same lung cancer.
Mm,
And yes, my grandmother wasn't smoking.
mm,
My mother was smoking, but my grandmother wasn't.
mm,
So, um, and my mother also had breast cancer as well, which was very, very, I mean, stage 4. I mean, insignificant compared. Sorry, stage 1, insignificant compared to the lung cancer, but it was still there. So there are these things that we constantly struggle with uh, in our minds, in our heritage, and we don't think about them before the age of 45 that much. But as I think 45 is a significant point where, especially like me, if you have young kids at this age still, it's very, very it's a harsh reality, and that needs to be considered as well. What's going to happen if something happens to me, and will I be able to have a nice, long, good life in a healthy way? Yeah, it's all
yeah,
very, very scary.
it is. And to me, I think there's a difference between, when I think about, a difference between dying and being incapacitated.
Oh
And
yeah.
uh, I think my fears are more along the lines of not being able to just sort of to take care of myself,
Yes, I can totally hear that. Yeah.
and not as much about dying.
Hmm.
um, and of course, like, when would be too much, and
Yeah.
when would I, um, but I know that's a bar that keeps changing also, because
Mm.
I feel like if you can just say today, well, can I live today? What can I do
Hmm.
today to live
Hmm.
my best? And it's not it doesn't get rid of those questions, but it's something at least we have more control over and agency. um,
I think you're saying very important things. I think it's about that agency to keep. You learn. I think your capacity is growing every day as well. How to use your agency to make your life a better place, even though our physical health may be deteriorating. There are always different capacities that we learn through self-care, therapy, and for some people it may be reading, studying, learning new things. And um, I think it's really important to focus on what can I do today? what has today in for me? And if we can still focus on that, life is still worth living then.
Yes. And I mean, when I see people like Stephen Hawking, who,
Yeah.
clearly he was, he had a lot to live for, um, and chose life. And,
Mm,
um, we can be very incapacitated, but still have the capacity to choose life. But that doesn't mean that if someone chooses doesn't choose life, that there's something. I certainly am not sitting in judgment of that. I mean, there's so many factors that obviously that go into um choosing life or not. um and I think it's really complicated,
very.
um
Yeah.
and um yeah.
But I think I am honored that we can talk about this here now. And I hope that the people who are listening on this will have new avenues to think of, to reflect on. It's really important for people who are facing an unknown future. We all are facing an unknown future, but if you have a disease, a progressive disease, it's even more so, of course.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. And I think this is something that we're just going to will be an ongoing
mm.
conversation, the first of many conversations about death and loss um,
and deteriorating.
mhm.
I think in a way, as you put it, it's somehow more it's somehow scarier than death itself, because death feels like the end of suffering, if you like. um, at least to me it does. But the loss of control, and not being able to be yourself in the world, is scarier for some people. So all the better reason for us to keep on talking about this.
Yes. And please, if you like this, if this was helpful, if you can press like, share with people that you think it would be helpful for. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out chronicillnesstherapy.com.